Okay, we're going to not do the bottom part, so I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide. Just skip through all this. Okay, the next picture then is looking at the microanatomy of the bone. And there's actually two kinds of bone. This type is called cancellous or spongy bone, and the other type is called compact bone. Now, when we look at the spongy bone, where's my arrow? Okay, spongy bone, you find the spongy bone at the ends of the long bone. So remember I showed you in the last video a long bone here, the femur. In the end here and here is where you find the spongy bone. And it looks like a sponge. If you picture this sponge that a lot of people use for cleaning, that would pretty much be what it looks like. The walls of the sponge are called the trabecula, also called little, which means little beams. So that's kind of what it looks like. And these are calcified portions, and that just helps reduce the force of compression. This is the femur, and so below here are your lower leg bones, and so your weight would be putting pressure on the bones below it. So having the spongy bone and the articulating bones, let me turn around where it's front, having spongy bone here helps resist that force of compression from the femur as you're standing up. The little holes in the spongy bone are filled with bone marrow and blood vessels, and specifically red bone marrow. Okay, actually make sure you type that in with it when it says bone marrow, do red bone marrow. And these, we listed a function of the skeletal system as forming forming blood cells, creating blood cells, and that's where it happens in the spaces in the red marrow of the spongy bone. Compact bone is found in bones like the middle part of these long bones, the middle part of the long bones. The unit, the smallest unit of compact bone is called an osteon. That's what this word is here, osteon, the unit of a compact bone. And it's basically just a bunch of cylinders that are very long, and they are surrounding this central canal. So picture a bunch of straws that you are holding in your hand together. Each straw would be an osteon, and it has a canal in the middle of it, and they're all bunched together. So here you see the osteons, and you can see the longitudinal view, and this is what it is looking straight on. This is, sorry, there's my dog. This is the same view of the microscope slide, the tissue slide that you looked at for your tissue biopsy activity. And this is kind of, make sure I got the angle of, there we go. So you can see here the different things that would be those straws. Remember, that's an osteon. So every round structure, it almost looks like a tree. When you've cut a tree and you can see the rings of a tree, that's what it looks like. Each one of those is called an osteon. In between the osteons, you have this calcified matrix or material, and that's called the interstitial lamella. Interstitial lamella. So layers of calcified matrix that are found between the osteons. In between each, if you look at an osteon close up, see if I can get closer there. There. Sorry, the light's kind of weird. So you see the rings, okay? Those rings, the circles, are the concentric lamella. And those are more cylinders of calcified matrix that surround this canal I told you in the middle. Let me get there. Okay, so that's the canal, the center of the tree, if you will. And the rings of the tree would be this concentric lamella. A concentric circle is just circles that surround each other and build upon each other, just like you see here. And so you can see, I'm going to angle this to see the 3D. It's like a little knob sticking out. There it is. Those Oh, get the light. There, you can see the concentric, almost like a tower. Here, you can see the concentric rings that are adding up around. That's the concentric lamella, and then you've got the central canal in the middle. That's the Haversian canal. In the canal, you would find blood vessels. So it's colored dark on pictures, and you saw the red blood vessel on the model that I showed you. So if you've ever broken a bone, you know it bleeds, okay? Not only the skin, if it breaks the skin, but also there's blood on the inside of the bone if you break it. There's also nerves in the Haversian canal. Again, if you've broken a bone, you know that it hurts quite a bit. And so that's because you're damaging the nerves when you break that bone. The next picture you have is looking at the inside of a long bone like this. So this would be the gross anatomy. This right here that we just did is the microscopic anatomy, because it's the stuff you see in the microscope. Gross anatomy is the stuff you see with your eyes. You don't have to use a microscope for. So we'll label these structures. The end of a long bone, again, this is the end of it here. On the inside is the spongy or cancellous bone. And we already mentioned what that was in the last picture. A lattice of trabecula, that's the solid part of the spongy bone, protecting bones from compression. And the spaces in there are filled with red marrow. The rest of the bone, this whole what's called the shaft of the bone, is made up of compact bone. And those are the osteons. If you look at that part in the microscope, you'll see the picture we just labeled. Those are the concentric circles called lamella. The osteons, each individual tree trunk, surrounds a central canal, the Haversian canal, which is what is filled with the blood vessels and the nerve tissue. The very middle of these long bones are hollow. It's not, you still have the compact bone on the side here, but the very middle of it is hollow. That's called the medullary cavity. It's filled with bone marrow. When you're young and still growing, it's red, but as you get older, it turns, it's a yellow marrow that's high in fat. Okay. Then this will depict the yellow bone marrow. So if you ever crack open a bone, you see this yellow fatty stuff, and that's the yellow bone marrow. And that is good storage material, stored energy. Wild animals love to crack open bones and eat the marrow because it's so high in nutrients, the fat, and it gives them energy for later usage. This is an artery to show you how there are blood vessels that come in close contact with the bone and then actually go into, you see it's like embeds into like wires into the bone, and they get smaller and smaller, and that's the same blood vessel that's in the middle of those canals, the Haversian canals on this model. The red lines are the arteries, the very small arterioles and capillaries. On the right side, then, we see that whole top of the long bone, this one here, and both ends. That's called the epiphysis. Epiphysis, found at the end of bones made of cancellous or spongy bone. Right at the base or bottom of the epiphysis is the epiphyseal line, and that's where your bones grow. As you're getting older, most of you have most likely stop growing. Well, you have a little bit left. It's usually 18 for females and 21 for males when you stop growing. And we'll talk more about that in another video, but this is where the growth takes place, the epiphyseal line. Before you stop growing, if you damage this, then you'll stop growing prematurely, as far as height is concerned. There's a layer of connective tissue called the periosteum that's found on the outside of the bone. Peri means upon. So this is a connective tissue upon the bone. And that's what attaches the bones to tendons and ligaments. We'll mention those later. This is pointing to this whole middle part, the shaft of the bone. This middle part here, that's called the diaphysis. Diaphysis. So the epiphysis is at the end, and the middle is the diaphysis. And then you have another epiphysis at the other end of the bone. I got it upside down. And this is what grows over time with your body. This may get bigger as you get bigger, but it doesn't really grow in length. This is usually mostly where all the length, growth in length takes place. And then finally, at the end of the epiphyses, you have a special cartilage, articular cartilage that covers that, and that just provides a smooth movement in your joints.